I'm Nicole, aka Wild Boho on social media, and I'm an embroidery artist who is always experimenting with threads and beads and looking for ways to mix threads and beads. And that's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be stitching and beading a dimensional object. So let's get right into it. These are the acorns that I have beaded, and these are the 3 complete ones, and then we're gonna be working on this one today. So this was from Michaels. It was in the fall section. It's labeled as a pick. So it's a softer item. When you're looking for a dimensional object to embroider, there are some items that as you're looking through the craft aisles, they're made of styrofoam. Those you wanna kind of stay away from, like, it's a styrofoam underneath of what looks like a cloth or a fabric. This is you can squeeze this and feel that it's actually a stuffed object, and so you want to choose something like this that your needle is gonna go in and out of kind of easily. This I'm leaving we're gonna talk about that when I get to this part, but we're gonna leave the stem on while we're stitching it, and then I'll show you how you can remove it, or you could be working on a series of these and including them in a floral arrangement or in a wreath. So I'll show you how you can leave it in. So that is your dimensional object. Think about that. It doesn't have to be an acorn. It really can be anything dimensional that has some stuffing and a little bit of give to it. Next, we're going to talk about beads because I love beads. So for this project, along here, you can see that we're using some of the larger beads. These are the Toho beads. They're size E, and I have 4 different colors. Now, as you're watching this, you can decide if you want to use just one tube or if you want to use several tubes of beads. But these are the larger size beads that we're going to add last to our project. These are the size 8 Czech seed beads that I'm going to be using for most of my project. This is it's the camera's not picking it up super great, but it's like an amber brown, and this is a gold. So I just picked 2 seed bead colors. Again, you can watch this class and then decide you want more than that, or you want to just stick with one. Completely up to you. I don't create specific lists because I kind of go with the flow and see what I like to do. And so I'm kind of assuming that you might want to do that too. Those are the beads. This is a sequin jar. So from underneath you can see it's got like different sections. This is made by Recollections. It's available in usually it's in the scrapbooking section at Michael's. If you find where like glitters and other like card type items, like to make your own cards and everything, I can always find it there. This is an absolutely perfect set to get started with beading. It has 6 neutral colors. I've gone through, this is now my second one because I just use these sequins all the time. If there were more colors, I'd buy those up too because they're great. They're really nice flat sequins, good quality. So we're going to be sprinkling in some of the sequins in our project too. I have embroidery scissors and a needle. We'll talk more about the needles when we actually start the project. And then threads. So on the supply list, we listed pearl cotton. So this is DMC's pearl cotton. I have 2 different colors that I'm going to be using. This is a type of thread that is not divisible. So when I've unraveled this one that I was working with, when you start to unravel it, this is what you get. It's just one strand of thread, which means you're not dividing this little piece up into lots of other pieces. That's something that can sometimes be confusing. You're using this exactly as is. I love using a pearl cotton because of that, because I don't have to worry about separating my threads. This is a size 5. You can see that's listed right here on the tag. So this is a medium weight. Pearl cottons you can usually find in a size 8, which is a thinner weight, a size 5, which is the medium in between, and a size 3, which is really thick. This is probably the thickest thread that I would use on a project like this, just because we are going in and out of, it's a fluffy object. You don't want a super thick thread because it's going to get stuck in your object. So we're using a pearl cotton, but I wanted to show you some other options for thread too. So this is, all of these you can find at Michael's in the hand sewing aisle. Um, so look for the hand sewing stuff, and you usually see all the gorgeous colors, which is where I always end up buying more threads than I need just because of the colors that catch my attention. So this is just your regular DMC floss. This is a type of floss that I'm going to cut it and show you. If you make friendship bracelets or if you've done any cross stitch, you've probably used this at some point. So this thread is divisible. It can be divided down anywhere from 1 to 6 strands, which is really great. I'll show you an example when I get to that. If you wanted a strand of stitching that wasn't quite as thick as all 6 strands, you can divide it into whatever works for you. So start with just dividing it in half so that you have a strand of 3 and see what that looks like. And then you can, for really fine facial features, sometimes if I'm embroidering like a face, or I just need something very fine, I'll even pull it down to just 1 thread so that I get some detail, but not too much thread. So this is a great thread that's really versatile for a lot of embroidery projects. If you're just adding beads to your project, I would use this and divide it down into maybe 2 threads because it'll give you the stability that you need for embroidering on something, but also it'll hold beads up well. This is DMC's toile. I hope I'm saying that right. That's how I say it in my head. This is another thread. I hope it's picking it up on camera. This is beautiful. It is, it has like a glitter throughout it. So if you want to use or want to add a little bit of metallic something to your project, this would be a great thread to start with. Sometimes metallic threads, as you work with them, are difficult to work with. They get tangled easily. People usually don't love stitching with metallic threads. This is a great way to get a little sparkle in your project and use a thread that's easy to work with. It's also divisible, which means it's separated, and I just separated it into 2 strands of 3. But again, this is the same as the other DMC thread. You could go anywhere from 1 to 6 strands to work with. So we're going to set those threads aside for now and get some of this out of the way. And I'm going to pull over my sample stitches. I work in a very small studio, so I am always moving things around to get my everything in order. So this is, I'm holding it upside down because of the way we're going to stitch it later. These are the 4 threads or the 3 threads that I just showed you. So this is what it looks like to stitch the stitch that I'm going to show you with a pearl cotton. Now, none of these are perfectly straight. This is not a stitch that's meant to be straight. And if you are new to embroidery, this is a really great stitch to get started with. You don't have to feel like you need to start with a back stitch or a stem stitch. This is a great stitch to just jump into embroidery. And so if you're new to this, no worries, like you can pick up this project. It's a really great starter project. So this is the pearl cotton, which is the thread that I'm going to be using on the object. This is the toile thread, and I don't know if you can see it, but there on my end, you can definitely see the sparkle throughout it. Side by side, this looks to be about the same thickness as the pearl cotton, but it's only because it's kind of wispy. So it's a little bit thinner, but it works up to be a little bit bulkier. And then right here is, this is the DMC, just the regular floss. And I used all 6 strands for this one. This is also the DMC floss, but I use just 3 strands. So you can see this is a little bit thinner than this one because I'm using only half the thread. But you get the same effect with all of them. So if you have threads, experiment with them and see what you like the look of. And this is a great way to get into experimenting with threads and beads. I just have an embroidery hoop, a plain fabric, and I hooped it up and I just practiced one stitch over and over again. When it's finished, it looks pretty. You can see your progress, but it also lets you refine your stitches before you get started on an object. So if you're a little nervous about jumping into an object like this, I would definitely recommend just starting on some fabric, just scrap fabric. It doesn't have to be pretty. This is just for your benefit to get you comfortable with stitching. So we are going to get started with stitching, and I'm going to show you the stitch first on here because it's a little bit easier to see me working up the stitch on this flat surface rather than on the acorn. We're still going to do the acorn, but I want to show it to you first. So I'm going to get this set up. I'm using a stand because I need a third hand right now. And I'm going to position it about there. I work this stitch from my direction to this direction. So from bottom to top, I guess, of the hoop. So I'm going to work it with the pearl cotton and I'm going to cut a length of thread. When you're getting started with embroidery, I'm going to tell you the recommended length of thread to use, and then you're going to ignore that and don't look at how much thread I actually cut when I do my project because I always use more than you're supposed to use just because I don't love threading needles. And for this stitch, I don't want to run out of thread mid-stitch. So I always end up cutting more, and that's when you should just ignore my advice. So I tie a little knot. I was doing that while talking. I just tie a little knot in the end. Again, this is personal preference. If you've embroidered before, some people don't like to tie a knot in their threads. I always do. I just need the security of a knot. And then to thread your needle, I don't use needle threaders because I always break them. So you just take the thread in between your thumb and finger, and you can see like there's barely any thread sticking out. Bring your needle to that, and the thread has nowhere to go but through the eye of the needle. And there you go. It's simple. Simple. I say that now because it's a decent thread, but when I'm trying to do it in a rush or with a thicker thread, it's not always that simple. So I'm going to start in this direction, and I'm going to give myself a few beads too, so that I can show you how we're going to add some beads. I'll use these gold ones because they show up nicely. And I'll mix in some of the brown ones too. And I'm going to also add a few sequins into the mix. So you can see the sequins are silver, there's a gold, a white, a black. There's a cool like dark bronze. I'm going to go with the gold for this one. That container will last you forever because you can see the sequins are pretty tiny, and I just poured out a tiny amount and still have tons in there. So it's a great value if you want to add sequins into your mix. So I'm going to bring my needle up. Let's see, I'll position that a little bit better. I'm always, for this stitch, this is the blanket stitch. I am bringing my thread to the top of my project. And now I'm going to just add a bead to my needle. The one thing I did want to mention about needles, you want to make sure, now I know this needle works because I've used this needle with these beads and this thread. Before you go to all the effort of threading your needle, just make sure that the bead can actually pass over the whole needle. And if it doesn't, just size your needle down until you find something that works with both the thread and the needle. So now I've brought my needle, or I've brought my thread up, and now I'm just kind of bringing it through the fabric. I'm going under and back up, and I want to make sure that my needle is coming over this thread and that my thread is coming to the top of the hoop. And then I'm going to pull it through. You can see the needle just sits, or the bead just sits there. The first stitch always looks a little wonky, so give yourself a little bit of patience to get the stitch going. And so I'm making sure that my thread again is going up this way. And I'm just kind of taking my needle sideways in and out of the fabric, just like that. Going over that thread again, and I'm pulling through. You add the sequin or the bead or whatever else you're using before you actually take your needle into and out of the fabric, but you can see the sequin is just sitting here on the thread until I actually finish the stitch. So just like that. I'll do one more with each bead and sequin, and then we'll actually get started on the object. So now this is kind of a wandery stitch. I'm working it in a straight row, but let me show you what it looks like to just kind of adjust the stitch wherever you want it to go. So I'm just moving where my needle and thread are located on the fabric, picking up my needle or my beads. And you can see I'm starting to like make a curved line. This is a lot of what you're going to see on the Acorn. You can see that I've made a lot of like curved lines like this. So this is the technique that I'm using on the Acorn when we get to that. And I'm just kind of moving my needle and thread to the left. I can go back to the right and start working back this way. So it's a really fun stitch to play around with when you're practicing your stitches. If you're practicing them on a piece of fabric like this, try it in a straight line. Do a stitch like that, a whole row of the blanket stitch in a straight line, but then try the curved line. And you can see how if this was on a, a piece of fabric, I do a lot of embroidery on printed fabrics. So it's a great one to go both around curves and straight lines. And then when I finish the stitch, when I get to the end, I'm just going to take my needle down again, and I'm just kind of anchoring that last little stitch. And I'll show you a little bit closer what it looks like. So you can see it just went down over there. When I'm ending my stitches on fabric, I then just run my needle through a few of those stitches. If it is a project that I have a lot of bead work, I will tie a knot. This is just a practice fabric, so I'm just cutting it and I move on. So now that we've practiced our stitches, I'll move that out of the way. We can get started with our actual object. So I'm going to peel the label off of this. Put that away. Now, I don't take if you're working on an object like this, like that you're going to put in a wreath, or it has like a long stem like this is a wire stem. I'm just bending it in because it creates a little bonus handle. So as you're stitching, you're not just holding on to this tiny little object, but it gives you a nice little handle to add your stitches and your beads and everything. And it's movable too. So as you work on each section that I'm going to show you, you can move it out of the way. So now I'm going to thread my needle again. Now remember that length of thread that I said you wanted to stitch with, which is about 12 inches for a normal embroidery project. I'm definitely cutting more than that. And the reason being is that I don't want to stop this stitch mid stitch, mid working. I kind of want to do one whole section with one long piece of thread. So we'll see how far we get with this. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm tying a little knot. Grabbing a sip of water, and we're going to thread our needle. Again, bringing your thread in between, you're just pressing it nice and flat in between your finger and thumb, and then you pull the thread through. I couldn't tell you exactly what type of needle this is. I use a lot of milliner's needles, so I believe that it's a milliner's needle. Again, I just made sure that this needle worked with these beads and sequins for today. So now let's get started. I am again working from the top of this acorn down to the bottom, and there's a reason for that. See all this fluffy little stuff up here? This is going to hide my threads. I don't follow patterns. I'm not super precise, and I like to hide little mistakes in things. Now, this knot isn't our mistake, but when I pull it all the way through, you can see that that's still kind of visible there. I hope you can see that. We're going to trim it a little bit. So once I've pulled it all the way through, I then pull it out. You see where my knot is. I'm cutting off just a tiny bit of that tail. Pull it tight again. And then you can see that it's like barely visible there. I've also picked a thread color that matches this acorn pretty closely. I want to see my stitches because I always say that if you're going to spend a lot of time embroidering something, you should see the thing that you've embroidered. You should see your stitches and be proud of them. So I wanted my stitches to kind of blend in, but I also wanted to be able to see them, to have them visible. So on this object, I have found that it is best, if you look at this, there are little sections here. I am working from the top corner of this section, and I'm going to work down that way, and then we're going to work back up. So it looks nicest when I start up here. So I've pulled my thread all the way through. I'm going to grab my first bead, and I'm starting this exactly the way I started it on the fabric. I'm making sure that my thread is up here as I stitch because I want to be going over that. And I'm just going to pick a spot and stitch. If you find that as you're doing this with an object like this, if you're getting a lot of resistance as you are beading, it might be because you're not going into the object as much. When I first started doing this, I was just kind of skimming the top of this object. And every time I did this stitch, it was pulling really hard. It was pulling the object. It wasn't looking nice. And I thought it was making it easier for myself to like just have my needle and thread going through just the top little layer. I was not making it easier for myself. I was making it more difficult. So you want to like really kind of go down into the object and like it's like you're scooping it, coming back up and pulling your thread all the way through. Now I am making these kind of close together. I want these little beads to be kind of nestled up next to each other. I mean, they're not like touching, but you can see they're fairly close. And as I am stitching, I'm just mentally working down to this area, and I'm kind of picturing like a little curve. And this is where you can kind of have fun with the wonkiness of this stitch. Sometimes these sequins were giving me a little bit of trouble. You can have fun with the wonkiness of this stitch and just move it all over the place. Kind of nice that it doesn't have to be too precise, especially if you're just learning and experimenting with this. You don't want to be too precise with your stitches. It kind of looks, it's a fun little curve that we're adding to this object. So I'm just alternating colors. I'm going to be careful as I get to this edge. I don't want to get too close because I'm going to be coming back and adding larger beads to that area, the larger ones that I showed you. So I'm just mentally also calculating that the space that I want to take up with that. And you can see I've come right to the edge. I'm just going to keep working and make it go back this way a little bit. It's a fun wandery stitch. If you want to learn another wandery stitch, I love the feather stitch for the same reason, because it is a nice wandery stitch that you just kind of let meander and have fun with it. So I think I might add one more because we're getting close to the bottom. And you want to make sure your thread, you're always going over it that way. I think I can add one more. You'll notice as you get closer to this stem, you can kind of feel it through the object. So you just want to make sure you're not actually going through the stem. It would be pretty tricky. You would definitely know that you're doing it because it is wire and it is like you'd feel that, because we're going to be pulling that out and we don't want our thread to get stuck or a needle to get stuck in that. So now I've come to the bottom, and this is the fun part. I want to work back up this way and kind of add in another little curve. So I'm going to stick my needle in. This is also why we have a lot of thread. And it's hiding all of this inside the object. So I'm just picking where I want it to start again. And I'm going to pull my needle and thread through that area. If we could x-ray this object when it was done and actually see everything that's going on inside, there'd be a lot going on inside, because I'm going to do this for each section of this. And I'm just going to do the same exact thing. I don't want it to look precise. I kind of want it to look swirly and random. You could come back and do one that's just entirely sequins, which I might do. I might do that up here because I didn't add too many sequins there. And I think we can add one more sequin. I'll show you an alternative to this in the next section that would allow you to not have to take your needle all the way through. But for this section, we're going to be doing this. And then I'm just going to add just a few more up here. So I'm doing the same thing again. You can squish the object and then you know you're not going to lose your needle inside, because you don't want to do that. So as I was squishing it, the needle had nowhere to go but through the acorn. And so I think we'll just add a little bit more gold and another sequin or two up here. Oops. So each section of this will look a little different. If you are doing an object like this that has sections, you could do different colors in each section. That would be kind of fun. I could stick with just the gold in one. I could do the brown in another. But I kind of like how that is looking. I don't want to add more to this section. So to end this now, I'm going back up to where all of the stitches hide. I'm going to take my needle up there. Now, depending on what you are using this for, I mean, if this is an object that's going to get handled all the time, you really want to be precise with knotting off your ends so that you're not losing your beads. They're not coming off. All I'm doing is tying a little knot. But if it's an object that's just for display and you know it's not going to get a lot of use, you could also just run your needle and thread like through it like this and cut it off. And I don't think it's going anywhere because the thread is traveling. You're going to have lots of threads going through this. But I just tied a little knot, again, hidden by this little fluff of the acorn top. So now this is not enough thread to start my next section. I want to work one more section with this and show you how just a different way to stitch this. Again, I'm using a lot of thread. Don't judge me. I don't want to do different sections of thread and have to knot it off each time I'm doing this. I start with my little knot. And I'm going to thread this needle again. Okay, so now I'm going to just work this section on the opposite side. I'm going to start the same exact way. So I'm bringing my needle, remember I'm hiding all of my stitches and everything up, or all of my knots up here. So I pull it through, but I have to cut that little tail, otherwise you would see that. So I just trim it off and give it another little pull to make sure it's nice and tight. Again, nice and hidden. Okay, so now we're going to start this the same exact way. I'm bringing my needle through. This is a great way to practice a stitch when you're working on an object that is just one stitch repetitive over and over again. It gives you a lot of practice. Um, and you might notice your first section will look a little different than your third and your fourth section of the object, but it is a really good way to practice a stitch. Plus, I think it's fun to add your own personal touch to a dimensional object like this. If you worked up a bunch of these, I think it would look really cute to add them to a wreath, like a floral wreath. Um, I'm always switching up my decor and tucking little things here and there, which is what I'm going to do with these. Just tuck them places. I think a little bowl of all of the acorns would be fun together. And I'm always checking the seasonal decor area at Michael's because there's something new like all the time. And so I just love to see what's coming out and what I can work with. That's a small object like this that you can personalize to your own taste and your decor and your colors and everything. Okay, so we're getting down to the bottom again. I'm going to add this one more stitch. Okay, so that's what it looks like. Now, before when I showed you how to start from the top again, we would take our needle through and we'd bring it up somewhere up here. We're not going to do that. I'm going to just bring my needle in and out just so I'm starting like a fresh row of stitches. And now I'm going to work my way up to the top. So the benefit of doing it this way is you're going to get your stitches and beads moving in a different direction so they don't look the same. You save a little thread when you're not carrying it through the object, but that's never my I think I'm a thread waster sometimes. I'm definitely guilty of that. I have a lot of thread and I end up wasting a lot of thread. So I'm usually not thinking about that with my stitches. It just gives it a different look. When we finish this, I'll show you the difference. You can see that your threads are kind of side by side right now because of the way that we're stitching it. And it's just letting us angle it differently. And so it doesn't look, I mean, my other side didn't look uniform, but it definitely doesn't look uniform to do it this way. So then I've come up here, I've met that. I don't want to go over this section. So now I am going to just take my needle through here. And I'm going to carry on with this. I'll maybe add one more. Now we have kind of an open area down here. So I'm going to take my needle down there. And now it's kind of just like you're coloring with thread and beads. So I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, what would catch my eye? Like what would I notice? I would definitely notice that large open space. So that's why I'm going through and I'm adding a few more sequins in here. You can just scatter them throughout wherever you see like something needs something. That's usually how I decide I'm done a project too. I just look at it. Sometimes I might take a picture of it and set it aside, look at the picture, come back to my object. Um, this is a slow stitching project. I always say like anything with embroidery is slow stitching. So you don't have to rush to get something done. Take your time with it, and make sure that you're really happy with how it looks. So it might take you, one or two stitching sessions to realize you're not quite done yet. So I've come down here and I just need a little bit of something right up here, I think. This is also why we start with such a long length of thread so that I can just keep going with adding beads and stitches until I'm really happy with the outcome of what I have created. Yeah, I think I just needed that one bead there. I don't want to go overboard. So now to end this again, I'm just going to take it up top where these two sections meet. And I'm going to tie a little knot. What I was saying before is if you didn't want to tie a knot, this isn't going to be something that's handled a lot. You could just take your needle and thread and go through the object. It's not going to pull out. It's not something you really have to worry about coming undone because it's going through the stuffing and everything that's in here. So again, if it's just going in a wreath, you could definitely do that. You wouldn't even have to worry about tying a little knot up top. So you could keep going with this, the other two sections. I have done that. This is an acorn that I've done all 4 sections, but I still need something along the edges to really differentiate the body of this from the sections. So that's when my larger beads are going to come into the mix. So these are the Toho beads, and I have bead trays over here. Now these are a larger bead, larger than the size 8 that we were using. So you won't really have to think much about needles with this because pretty much any needle will work with this bead. I also like these because they are so visible. I really, really love beads and mixing them with threads. So I love to see the beads that I'm working with. And I just picked 4 colors that kind of went with the whole vibe of this project. And this is where I'm going to pick my other colored thread. So we're going to move the yellow out and we're going to work with this. It's kind of like a ivory color. About a length of that. And start the same exact way with knotting your thread, threading the needle. That technique of threading the needle works really well too if you're working with a tapestry wool, or sometimes I use like needlepoint yarn, other yarns with a project that you might think would be really hard to thread a needle with. If you can like squeeze it between your fingers and like it really does have nowhere to go except the eye of the needle. It usually will work fairly easily. So we have this section, and actually I never bent the handle of this one, so I'm gonna bend that. And we're gonna do the same thing. We're gonna start at the top. So just pick a section, start the same way. It can be a little trickier because you're working with seams now, but that wasn't so bad. And I'm going to do the same thing of trimming that little bit off of my thread. Okay, by this point in the project, you've done all 4 of these sections and you are a pro at adding beads with the blanket stitch. So we're going to grab a bead and we are following a line now. So I'm just taking my needle. I'm going like under the line that's there. So my bead is kind of going to end up right on that line. And this first one, there we go, that went through pretty easily. And so you decide how far apart you want these to be. I want there to be a decent amount of, like, I don't want them touching each other. I want a little gap in between them. This thread is more visible on the acorn because it's a different color. That's totally okay. I really like bringing the color of the acorn top down into my acorn a little bit. And the beads are laying nicely down here. I could actually have stitched them a little bit closer together, but I kind of like how that looks. Nothing is super, super precise about this project, so I think it's probably better to have a little space in between them. I'm going through a thread here. There we go. Sometimes when you get stuck at this point, there are a lot of threads that you're kind of working with underneath as you're bringing your needle in and out. So just be a little bit patient with yourself. And I think we can do maybe one more down here. Now at this point, I kind of gauge how much thread I have left. I know I have 4 sections of this that I want to stitch with these larger beads. The end part is very tricky because I've also got this wire stick going through there. Be patient with yourself. I don't exactly want to tie my knot down in this area because I don't want it to be seen. And remember, I was hiding all of my knots up at the top. So because I'm already at the bottom here, I'm just going to carry my thread through to the next section and bring it up at the base of my next section of this object. And I'm going to pick a different color, these darker gold ones. And I'm going to stitch my way to the top now. Doing the same exact thing, just being mindful of where my beads are, because by this point in your project, you do have a lot of beads. There's a lot of sequins, a lot of things to just be aware of where they fall in your project. Could have done those a little closer together, but this is looking fine. Again, a nice cluster or bowl full of these. You're not going to notice any little mistakes or little things that you should have done differently. You're just going to see a lot of sparkle and hand stitching, which is the coolest part of this. I didn't have to create this object. I'm not a sewer, I'm an embroiderer, so I didn't have to put this object together. However, if you are a sewer or you want to try and create something like this, using felt, like sheets of felt that you can get at the store, um, you could create your own dimensional objects and get crafty that way too. Okay. I don't trust that this is enough thread to go down this other section. So I'm going to tie my little knot. I think I have time to do one more section before I show you how to completely finish this up. So we're just going to cut one more length of thread and pick a different color. I think we're going to go with some of the larger gold beads. You'll become an expert at threading needles after this too. You won't have a fear of threading a needle. Okay, and I'm going to start at the top of this section. Okay, so there's my darker gold. So we're going to put some gold beads in here. Nestling my knot. And adding one last row of beads. If you wanted to play around with some bugle beads, which I didn't do, I thought about doing the whole time I was working on this. I wanted to add in some bugle beads. I think the top, the acorn area, would be a fun area to add some of those. You also could just go crazy with sequins up there and take your, I would use the étoile thread, maybe take it down to one or two strands in a color that kind of matches that area. And I would just do little stitches to add some sequins. Anything is, I think, adding sequins to anything makes it better. It's just fun, and if I have the opportunity to add sequins, I will. So you could just play around with this and see what you can do with the top of the acorn, or work them into whatever object you are doing. It doesn't have to be just an acorn. Really look at any dimensional object as material to embroider and bead on. I think we can actually finish the last section up with the last color of beads, and then we'll have a finished acorn. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to shimmy my little needle over to this section, pick my last color that we didn't use yet, this silver. And you are almost done. I'll show you how easy it is to end this project then. I like the two sized beads side by side. I really like using, I mean, out of the two, I'd have to say my favorite is always this larger bead, just because when you're working on a project like this, I like to see my beads. So I like the larger beads, but I like to see the variety side by side of the different types of beads and the different sizes. We're almost at the top of this one. I think we can fit one more bead there. Use your judgment. I think I'm going to add one. Okay, so we're at the top again, and I'm just gonna take this one through to the other side and not this part. And again, I wouldn't do that. If I was adding beads to clothing, something that I'm wearing, I would never do that. I would want to tie knots and really have everything secure and not worry about beads falling off. But because this is something that is just going to sit in a bowl or sit on a shelf, I don't have to worry about that. I don't have kids that are playing with it. Like my kids are older, so they're not going to play with the beaded acorns that mom stitched. Okay. So when we get to this part, you could trim this wire stem off. However, for this particular object, the stem goes all the way through and you can kind of feel it up at the top. So when you cut it off, it's hard to completely cut it off without leaving a little bit visible. The way I did it, and I'm hoping this one works out, it worked for all the others, is I just start twisting it and you can feel it start to loosen from inside. And I'm just pulling it carefully because I don't want a ton of stuffing to come with it. Now you can see some stuffing did come out, but that's what scissors are for. I just take my scissors and I'm just going to push that back inside just like that. And we are the only ones who will ever notice that because you sat here and watched me do it. Nobody else will ever know that. And there is your finished acorn or your finished dimensional object. So if you're going to stitch an object like this, pick something that you like looking at, something that you're going to enjoy working with because you are working with it for a little while, and pick something that you're going to enjoy looking at afterwards because you spend time on it and now you just get to enjoy the process. So happy stitching.
Nicole, that was so great. Thank you so much. You really took it from something really simple to something really spectacular. We were curious, what are your plans for your acorns?
I've been looking for the right sort of like I was looking for a clear shaped bowl, like not quite a vase, but something to put them in to kind of like stack them a little
Yeah.
bit like that, to kind of like raise them up. I think if I sat them in a bowl, all I would see is the tops of the acorns, and that's not what I wanna see. I wanna see the part that I worked on. So I've kind of been I do a lot of thrifting and everything. I've been looking for something that's, like, kind of narrow and tall that they could kind of stack inside. So when I do find that, I will post a picture of it on my
Oh,
social media,
please
and you
do.
can see
Please
how it
do. Because,
ended up.
yeah, you're right. I'm thinking of like a clear glass vase and they're
Yes.
stacked one on top of the other, and you could
Yes.
see all the way through. So thank you
Yeah.
so much. You've given us so much inspiration and so many great ideas.
Thank
And
you.
yeah, we look forward to your next class, Nicole.
Thank you.